Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you might be. Um, Today is the 25th of October, and I'm just gonna quickly talk about one thing that I am really concerned about, and it should concern a lot of people, and that is to do with what's happened, the breaking news that we've had 2 days ago. The 39 people who were found dead in a lorry in London, in Essex. Regardless of what their nationality is, and although we don't have a confirmed nationality of these people, and the police are still investigating the issue. But what I'd like to say is this is one of the issues that we as human beings are struggling with. And this issue has more than one dimension. It's multidimensional. Some of it is to do with, most of it is to do with policies. Another thing is to do with economy, and also to do with history. So I believe if we're going to understand this issue in its core and what are the causes of this, we need to go back to history. Secondly, we need to look into the world economy kind of imbalance that we've faced, and that is a systematic issue throughout the world, between the northern and southern hemisphere. Not only the northern, I would say the European Western kind of zone, which would include America and their allies like Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and also the rest of the world, North, South America, Africa, Asia, majority of the Asian countries, excluding few countries, and Russia as well. So there's more than one issue, and it's about access. It's about how the world power countries are systematically trying to put people or to leave people in poverty, and then not taking responsibility for that. So if we look into the historical context of these issues, we have colonization. Colonization has a lot to do with this issue. We never knew about Europe, and no one was interested in Europe. But Europe Europeans had the audacity to invade our countries, Africa, Asia, and other countries. So they came to our countries, and that led to them looting a lot of the resources from these countries, especially Africa, and these resources were taken to Europe, and the result was African countries and African nations were destroyed in a systematic way. People were colonized, people were made ignorant, and the systems that had worked for years and years, maybe thousands of years in some places, were systematically destroyed. For example, educational system. The educational system of Africa had existed, and people had ways of teaching and learning, yet that was destroyed. The educational system in the Middle East was destroyed. The educational system in other Eastern Asian countries was destroyed. So that led to people being ignorant to the extent that they were unable to even read and write, which is just like literacy had collapsed. So this is a historical context. The economic side of colonization was also another issue that we should look into. So when Europeans colonized other countries, they were working for their benefit. So they had to loot other countries, they had to loot other African countries, and that led to the economies, having the economies collapsing, which had eventually led to economical dependency on other economies and European economies. Thirdly, the international conventions, especially after the Second World War, some people because of the power of the economical power and also the power of the gun, to be honest. They gave themselves the power to police the world, to control the countries, other countries, and that led to some countries being lesser in terms of power and just being followers. And not only the countries, the people and everything. So every system within these countries became dependent upon the system that is being imported from other systems, which don't necessarily work in the countries that you are importing it into. So if you import a system that works in England, for example, it doesn't necessarily work in other African country, and that is something that a lot of people were unable to understand. And also, at times, it wasn't only imported, it was exported, meaning that it was imposed upon these countries. So the form of democracy and justice that we talk about is at times imposed. And that led to people being ignorant, people not having to think for themselves. And the historical context of these things also could be looked into from the not only from the power share, as I said, after World War II, also from the economical side. So the collapse of economies, and also another thing that we can look into is the agreements that these governments, as a result of these historical and economical powers, are making. For example, one of the things that we look into when we look into immigration routes, the Khartoum process. The Khartoum process is, for those of you who are not aware of it, is a multi-regional agreement that was held between the government of Omar al-Bashir, the former president of the former party, the former government of Sudan, and EU, and I think Eritrea, Somalia, Ethiopia, and these countries. So this is to control and curb migration from the Horn of Africa and stop that route. So, but that process has now been suspended since July because it wasn't effective, and a lot of people, it was being used to destroy livelihoods, to kill people, to imprison people, to deport people to a place where they were not safe to be deported to. So these kind of issues and the ineffectivity of that process had led to the European Union deciding to suspend that process. So the Khartoum process is one of the things that when we look into how the EU as an institution, how Europeans as superpowers today are acting in a way that would put people in risks. So a lot of migrants, a lot of refugees from the Horn of Africa were put in desperate situations in Libya and other places. So what's happened a couple of days ago in the UK, in Essex, 39 people were found dead in a lorry. I think it was a refrigerator, so they were frozen to death or suffocated probably. We don't yet have the official investigation is still taking place, so we don't really know what the cause of the death were. But these are the possibilities that would have happened to these people. So, another thing that I would like to talk about is I think we need to look, the EU needs to provide safe access for people who are actual refugees and asylum seekers who are looking for a safe place where they could live safely without having to fear persecution from governments or from any form of militias or anything. So we have thousands and tens of thousands of people in Libya. We have tens of thousands in Sudan. We have tens of thousands in Chad. We have tens of thousands in Bangladesh. We have tens of thousands in Turkey, Lebanon, and other countries who are refugees, about 70 million altogether. So these people, they don't necessarily have to have access. They don't necessarily all qualify to be called refugees, and they don't necessarily have to have access to Europe, but they need to have access to a safer place. It doesn't have to be Europe. It doesn't have to be Canada. It doesn't have to be North America, Australia. It could be anywhere else where it is safe for them to live happily. And this is the main issue that I want to talk about. It could be a breaking news that was happened. It could be breaking news for media outlets or for the BBC, but it was a heartbreaking news for people who have humanity in their hearts. If you have humanity, if you believe that human beings should be treated decently, then was the news of yesterday or a couple of days ago in the UK, in England, should break your heart. Similar incidents, similar things are happening in Libya. Other news that are coming from there: people have been kept in militia prisons for some of them for years now, to be honest. So I believe there should be a voice for those who are not talking, or who cannot, voice their own voices, who cannot say things, who cannot tell the world about their stories. We should, if we are able to, if we are in a position to tell their stories, then we should do so without hesitating or anything. And also we need to speak to power. We need to speak to governments. We need to speak to our, members of parliaments. We need to speak to our members of European parliaments. We need to speak about those who are policymakers. We need to speak about it in our families, in our communities. We need to discuss these issues so that there is, one, awareness. Secondly, there is a global action that could be taking place, or at least a communal action within your own community that would lead to having different communal actions throughout the countries, or throughout the country where you live, which would eventually lead to having a national action. And that national action could be replicated somewhere else, or could be replicated in other countries. So having more than one national action within Europe or within other countries would lead to having a global action that would eventually lead to finding solutions for those who are struggling, for those who want to make it to a safer place, for those who want to live a normal life, a decent life like everyone else. The fact that having a European passport or being a European citizen would give you a favor over other citizens, I think this is a fallacy. This is something that we shouldn't adhere to. This is something we shouldn't be happy with. Even if you are a European, or if you hold a European passport, you should at least think that we all share the same humanity. We all share this world, and everything that's taking place wherever it is affects me or you, or wherever you are. If something's happening back in Africa or in Asia, it has a direct effect in London. It has direct effect in the UK, in New York, and when that feeling is established, then we can at least say that we have achieved our humanity. We have regained our humanity, and we're working towards the creation of a safer place where we could hand over to the next generation. The policies that we see around the world are, one, unjust. Two, they are irrational at times. So the rationale and shouldn't be interest. Interest is a big lie that we face. The rationale should be the humanity and within us. So if I deserve a better or good life, if my child deserves a good life, then why wouldn't another child who lives somewhere in the suburbs of Asmara, or in the suburbs of Khartoum, or in the suburbs of Beijing would deserve similar life, or the same life as myself or as my child? So this is the kind of feeling, this is the kind of thinking that we need to get into, and trust me, it wouldn't happen because just by itself. We need to work on it. We need to lobby policymakers, people who are in positions of power. We need to change them. They cannot change themselves, because when you're in power, power corrupts people. Power changes people. When they're in power, they're detached from people. They're detached from you and me. They're detached from ordinary people. They don't feel it. Unless it has to come to their own doors. Um, so, and it won't easily come to their own doors. So if that's the case, then we need to work on that issue. We need to make them feel that it's just outside their doorstep, and it could happen to them. It could happen to their children at any time. I really want to pass my condolences to the families, friends, and those who know these people, and every person who's passed away on the move, trying to make it to a safer place. I also for those who are still on the move, trying to make it to a safer place. I wish them a good luck, and I hope every one of them will make it a safer place very soon. This was just a quick discussion about, or kind of conversation monologue about my feelings and what should be done, and also thinking about the historical and economic context of things that we see in our world, especially when it comes to migration, power imbalance in the world, economical deprivation. That was, to me, that is systematic to a very high extent, because the North is living, on the expense of the South. That's what's happening, and it shouldn't be that way. The North and South should be living should be sharing whatever it is on this earth, and the earth has enough to be shared, enough and sufficient for all of us. And the destruction of livelihood of other communities would eventually lead to the destruction of our livelihood in our own countries, even if we think that we are stable and we're far away from these places which are affected by conflict, famine, by our intervention to cause a conflict at times. When I say our, I am coming from the European perspective, of course, but that doesn't mean that I am happy or in agreement with what European policymakers are doing to stop people from coming to Europe, or to destabilize places and other countries throughout the world. I hope that was enough to pass the message, and I also hope that people had received the message and the delivery was good enough for you to act and start acting. Have a blessed day, everyone, and I'll probably see you soon. Ma salam, assalamu alaikum.